So mobile connectivity and security. So there's a lot of different ways you can get network connectivity on your mobile device. The first one is you can use what's called the Global System for Mobile Communications, or GSM. Everywhere in the world, GSM is the standard, with the exception of 3 places: Korea, Japan, and of course the good old United States. There are some GSM carriers here. If you use AT&T, T-Mobile, or Cricket Wireless, those 3 are GSM carriers. Everyone else runs on what's called CDMA. Essentially, it's just a different standard that we use a different frequency band, but they still all have 3G, 4G, and LTE access. Nowadays, almost everyone is using LTE, which is the long-term evolution. Much higher speeds, they go up to 100 megabits per second. Your transmitter and your receiver will adapt to whatever the slowest device is. So when you're dealing with the tower, if you're a 3G guy and the tower is LTE, it will downgrade itself to talk to you, and that's fine. If you're LTE and there's a 3G tower you're trying to connect to, your phone will go back down to 3G speeds, right? You guys have all seen that before. As you're looking at your phone, it goes between LTE and 4G, and sometimes even down to 3G or 2G, depending on where you are. The other way you can connect, that's usually a really nice, fast way to connect and doesn't use your data plan, is wireless LANs, right? Use a wireless LAN antenna in your phone. And most of your phones now are going to be N or AC connections. Older phones did have B and G. And again, 802.11 is the wireless standard. If you're going on an airplane, you need to turn your phone into what's called airplane mode. And so if you go into your iPhone, your iOS phone, you'll go into settings and then click on airplane mode. It will turn off your cellular antenna and your wireless antenna, because these were designed before we were allowed to use Wi-Fi on planes. Okay? Nowadays, you'd go into airplane mode and then turn back on your Wi-Fi antenna because you can connect to the plane's Wi-Fi. For Android, it's usually under the settings, under wireless and networks, and then airplane mode. And again, it will turn off the cellular and wireless antennas. And then if you're allowed to on the plane you're on, you can turn Wi-Fi back on. So your Wi-Fi network connectivity, like I said, we have B, G, N, and now AC access. When you go and turn on the wireless LAN antenna, it's going to search for the available networks by their SSID, their server set identifier. You'll select the appropriate one and enter your password if there is one. So for instance, here's a picture of an iPhone and somebody who is connected to the IH network. And if you clicked on it, if there was another picture from an SEU network, if you wanted to drop that network, you can actually click on forget this network and it will drop you from that network. Sometimes you'll have problems with your Wi-Fi. One of the easiest troubleshooting methods, if you know where the antenna is, move closer to the antenna. You might be out of range, right? So if you can go closer to the access point, that might solve your problem. Make sure you're connected to the correct SSID, the correct server set. So if you were trying to connect to TW or IH and you clicked on your network and you see that you're connected to the SEU network, that's obviously the wrong one based on what we thought we were connected to. So if that's the case, you would forget that network and then go back and click on the correct network. You want to make sure you're matching the encryption method of the network. Again, on iPhones and Android phones, they usually do this for you automatically. It'll ask you for the password, you'll give it the password, and it'll do the automatic encryption for you. Ensure your Wi-Fi tethering or internet pass-through is configured correctly. Some phones will allow you to turn them into a mobile hotspot so you can use your phone as a modem for your laptop. That's called pass-through, internet pass-through, or Wi-Fi tethering. If you have that incorrectly configured, what will end up happening is you can have your phone trying to access your laptop instead of your laptop trying to access your phone. And that'll make it so you're not going anywhere. The other thing you can do is you can do what's called power cycling your mobile device. And what that means is you turn it off and turn it back on again, right? The old IT cliche, have you tried turning it off and turning it on again? Because honestly, it fixes about 80 to 90% of your problems. So when I talk about power cycling the device, I'm not just talking about hitting the power button once and making the screen go black. I'm talking about actually shutting down the device and turning it back on. For your iPhones, if you press and hold the power button for about 3 to 5 seconds, you'll get the big red arrow across the screen that says power off this device. You slide your finger across it, it shuts the whole device down. Wait for it to shut down, usually takes about 5 to 10 seconds. Turn the device back on, you'll get the Apple logo. About 30 seconds later, you'll be back to your screen. Android, very similar. Press and hold the device. You'll have the power off. You can hit that. It will shut it down completely, and then you can turn it back on completely, just like rebooting your computer. You can also power cycle the access point. So if we try to your mobile device and it's still not working, well, maybe it's the home network that's having the problem. And so if you have access to the access point because it's in your house, you can go unplug the modem, the router, the wireless router, count to 5 or 10, plug it back in, wait about 30 seconds, then try to reconnect. right? So we're trying our own device first. If that doesn't work, then we'll go out to the whole network, which is going to affect all the users. If that doesn't work, you can also try forgetting the network and reconnecting again. Sometimes making that new establishing connection will fix it. And if needed, you can verify your advanced settings, like your DNS and your router. As you see when you click on the device, you can see that here. We have our subnet, our IP address, and our router and DNS information to make sure that it's actually proper. Another way we connect to things is through Bluetooth. And we talked about this before in our networking chapter, that it's a personal area network. It's good for short distances. So from our cell phone, maybe to our headset. So here's a picture, for instance, of an Android phone. It's connected on Bluetooth, and it's connected to the headset called Motorola H700. This goes through what's called the pairing process. If you've ever hooked up a Bluetooth device before, this will sound very familiar to you. Essentially, you're going to configure your mobile device. You'll click on Discoverable, making your device discoverable. Or you'll use setting up and scanning for devices. So if you're going to connect your phone to your computer, you might make your phone discoverable and your computer would then search for that phone. If you're trying to connect a headset, you'll make your headset discoverable, and then on the phone you will scan for devices. When you do that, it's going to look for it, whether it's a keyboard, mouse, microphone, headphone, or printer. When the device finds it, it will ask you for the passcode. If you don't know the passcode, try 0000 or 1234. Those tend to be the defaults for most manufacturers, especially for headsets. They tend to be 0000. If you're trying to figure out why your Bluetooth device isn't working, you might want to check the other device to make sure it's enabled. If you have a headset and maybe the battery's off or the device is off, your phone's not going to find it, obviously, right? Check the charging level in the batteries. If the batteries are dying, the Bluetooth device is not going to work properly. Check your range. Most Bluetooth in America is 10 meters, which is a Class 2 Bluetooth device. So if you're using your car or your headset, 10 meters is about 30 feet. You get further than that, you're going to end up losing signal. If you're going through walls, that's going to decrease significantly. So if I left my phone in my bedroom and I walked over to my closet with my headset on, with that wall in between us, that can actually degrade my signal, and I won't get the full 30 feet. And then again, you can restart your device or forget it and then reconnect it, and that'll usually solve your problem as well. So iOS synchronization. So if you have an iPhone, the way that we get our data to and from our iPhone is all done through iTunes. Okay? So we use iTunes, and it will actually sync our contacts, our music, our videos, our photos, and our applications between our laptop or desktop and our cell phone. To do this, we're going to connect using our either 30-pin connector for the old iPhone 4s or below, or the Lightning connectors for the newer phones. We're going to connect that to our tablet. Or nowadays, you can also do wireless sync over the wireless network, over Wi-Fi, if you're both on the same network. So if I'm on Jason's home network and my laptop's there and my cell phone's there, they can wirelessly sync as well. To charge the device, you have to use an AC adapter. If you're using an iPhone, you can usually plug those into a USB port on a laptop or a desktop and charge your phone. If you try doing that with an iPad, they draw too much power and they're not going to charge very well. So you want to plug them into a USB 3.0 port if you're going to try that. Or preferably use one of the AC brick adapters, plug it straight into the wall, and it'll actually get a better charge for you. iPads and tablets tend to need more power than cell phones, and so again, you want to use them directly into an AC outlet. It'll work a lot better for you. Android. So again, one of the weird things about Android is because it is open source, not everyone works the same way. So this is just an example of one. So if you have a particular phone like the older HTC Evos, they came with a software program you can install on your computer to do the syncing between your computer and your cell phone. Most Android by default doesn't come with one particular way to sync it. It's all different depending on your device. But one of the most common ways that they do it is you actually sync it through your actual applications. So if you're using Gmail, you can sync your contacts and email through that. If you're using Picasa, which is for photos, it'll sync through the cloud that way. And things like that are usually how we get things on and off of our Android devices. The other way to get data on and off our devices is we can hook it up using a USB cable, which we use a micro USB on the phone, and we'll plug it into our computer, and it will usually show up as an external drive, like a thumb drive, and you can copy files on and off the device that way as well. Some of the newer ones do come with a better sync capability. Originally, when Android came out, they didn't have a really great sync function. That was something that iOS and Apple had done better than Android originally. That's been changed over the years, and there is getting to be better synchronization for Android. But again, most of it is still being done through the cloud. So email configuration on your mobile devices. One of the big things we use our mobile devices for is checking our email. And this is something that for a long time BlackBerry was dominant because everybody wanted mobile devices and email service, and they were the first ones to provide that type of service. So there's a couple of different ways you can get your email. One is you can use web-based email. You simply open up the web browser on your tablet or your phone, you go to gmail.com, and you can get your email that way. The second way, and the more popular way, is to use a mail program, which you're going to have to configure using either POP3, IMAP, or SMTP configurations. Remember, POP3 and IMAP are two different ways for us to get inbound email, and SMTP is the way we do outbound email. For the exam, you'll probably be asked to set up email on a mobile device as one of your simulations. If you're going to use security, you're going to want to use SSL or TLS. That's Secure Socket Layer or Transport Layer Security. We talked about those back in the networking lesson, and that changes the port numbers for POP3, IMAP, and SMTP. The nice thing on the exam is you don't need to memorize these 3 port numbers for the exam, because in the simulation question, if you get this question, they're going to tell you, here's my server name, here's the port I use it on. Okay? So for your port numbers, as far as for the exam ABCD questions go, if you remember your POP, your IMAP, and your SMTP as the standard ones, being 110, 143, and 25, you're still going to be fine. When you go secure, you use these ports, but you don't need to memorize them for the exam. So to troubleshoot your email, you always want to check internet access. If you don't have internet access, you're not going to have email access. Make sure your usernames and passwords were typed correctly. Check your port numbers to make sure that you're using the right ones. Whether or not you're using the default ones we said, 110, 25, and 143 down here, or we're using the secure ones that we have listed up top. And then check and make sure that you have the settings set for either SSL or TLS. Generally, setting up email on these devices is fairly easy. It's pretty much a walkthrough wizard. For instance, on Apple, you see at the top here, they give you some of the standard email clients, and then they have other. And so if I was going to use, say, jasondion.com and I had my own mail server, I would click on Other, and then it would ask me for my POP server or my IMAP server and my SMTP server. If you're going to use Gmail, it's real easy. You just click on Gmail, type in your username, type in your password, and it'll do all the configuration for you. Same thing down here with the Android device. You can see here what kind of mailbox you're using, POP3 or IMAP4, and you'll walk through the setup guide, and it'll ask you questions. On the exam, they're going to have a very basic setup for you. It's going to ask you for username and password. It's going to ask you secure or not secure, whether you're using SSL or TLS. It'll ask you for POP3, IMAP, or SMTP, and you'll choose the right one for inbound and the right one for outbound, and it'll make it fairly easy for you. Mobile device security. So for our mobile devices, we have a couple of different ways to secure them. The first one and the easiest one is we use a passcode, right? You can use a passcode or a screen lock to lock your device. For Android, they allow you to do a pin or a picture. And when they talk about a picture, basically they have some dots and you drag your finger to make a picture out of this 9-pin dot, right? So you can draw like a little box or an X or something like that. And that would be your particular password, which makes it a little bit more complicated than just a 4-digit pin. For Apple, they support either simple, which is the pin, or they support complex, which is an actual password for theirs. Or the newer phones all have the thumbprint reader. And so you can actually use your thumb to lock and unlock your phone. You can also set what's called an inactivity lock. That's where if you haven't touched it, say in 3 or 5 minutes, the phone will lock itself. So for instance, while I'm teaching, I put my phone over here on my desk. If I was just finished using it and dropped my phone, maybe Charles came over and grabbed my phone and started going through it in the middle of class, right? I wouldn't want that. He might do that, right? So if I have an inactivity lock, he has to get to it within the first 3 minutes, otherwise it's going to lock itself, if I forgot to lock it myself. The other thing you can do is what's called a device wipe. So if you use an incorrect passcode a certain number of times, your device will actually wipe all the data off. Because really when it comes down to it, if I lose my phone, I'm not really worried that much about the phone itself. I can go buy another phone for a couple of $100s. But the data on here is very important to me. I might have usernames and passwords for my banking stored in here. Or do you have banking apps on your phone? I do, right? And so if somebody got my phone, maybe they can get into my bank accounts, or my brokerage accounts, or my email, and do all sorts of nasty things for me. And I wouldn't want that to happen. So in this case, if they type in the passcode wrong 10 times on my phone, it'll wipe all the data on my phone, and that way everything gets erased. Now, a word of caution here, if you have little kids, you may not want to use this feature. Because if you have little kids, they often go in your purse, like my wife's purse. My kids go in her purse and grab her phone and try to break the passcode to get to play the games on the phone, right? Especially if like young kids, like 3 or 5 year olds. And if they type it in wrong 10 times, guess what happens? You lost everything on your phone. It now becomes a blank slate, brand new, ready to be reconfigured. So you have to weigh that operation versus security again, right? And then the last one is the remote wipe. So let's say I'm driving down the street in a taxi cab. I get out of my taxi cab and I realize, oh no, my phone fell out of my pocket in the taxi. What should I do? Well, maybe what I'll want to do is do a remote wipe because I lost that device and I don't want people to get access to it. And what that is, I can go to the website. For instance, I have an iPhone, so I can go to Find My Phone, and I can actually click a button on there that will erase all the contents on that phone from wherever it is in the world, as long as there's an internet connection, even though I'm not with it anymore. And I'll show you what that looks like in a little bit here. So here's handling your lost phones, right? So the first thing you want to do is find your phone. So for instance, here's a picture of my phone. When I go to the website for iCloud and I sign in, I get a picture that says, hey, here's all your devices. And if I click on Jason's iPhone, I can either play a sound, I can put it in lost mode, where basically it puts a message on the screen and starts beeping. Like if I lost it in my house, I can click that, and it'll start beeping really loud so I can go find it, right? Or that remote wipe, erase the iPhone. If I click that, it'll say, are you sure? I put in my passcode, and it will erase everything on that device. So you now have a brand new iPhone, but at least my data is safe. With Android or iPhones, they both have this Find My Phone, Find iPhone function, which is great for losing it if you lose your phone. It also gives me a GPS location of where it is. So here you can see my old house, and that's where my phone and my wife's phones were at when I pulled this screenshot. Find My iPhone can also send messages to the device. So when I do the lost mode, I can actually have the option of sending a message that says, if you have my phone, please call 555-5555. I'll give you a reward for it, right? I'll give you $100 if you give me back my phone, right? That kind of thing. Or, again, you can erase that phone remotely. If you lose it in a taxi cab, best thing to do, erase it, right? Because you don't want your data stolen. Especially with business, that phone is a way into your business's network, right? So you got to remember that from a security standpoint. You may see questions like that on the exam, right? If you lose your phone, what do you think you want to do? Erase it, right? Remote wipe. Do you want to go track down the phone? I mean, I have a beautiful picture exactly where it is, right? I can go drive down the street and go knock on that person's door. Is that a good idea? Maybe not, right? There's been cases where people have gone and, because somebody stole your phone, right? And you turn on your tracker and you're like, I'm going to go get my phone back. That's not always a good idea, right? You could get hurt doing that. If you think you know where your phone is based on something like this, call the police, have them go get your phone for you, if they're willing to take the case. Sometimes they're busy and don't have the time to do it though, right? But yeah, you don't want to go and approach these people by yourself, especially if there's a lost phone, not a big deal. Probably it's a nice person who has your phone, right? But if it's somebody who stole it from you, you don't want to go tracking them down.
Plus, there's a lot of TSA people taking phones and the phone right to their houses that happen.
Yeah, I had a friend who lost his iPhone while he was at Disney World, which is a pretty big place, right? So, they went on a ride, they couldn't find the phone. He asked his wife for her phone, pulled up his Find My Phone, and he's watching on the map as the little green dot's going down Main Street at Disney World into the lost and found. So he knew where his phone was, so he walks down and goes, hey, do you have my phone? And they were able to pull it out and get it to him. So it's pretty cool. You can see this, and it updates in real time using that GPS we talked about last lesson, right? Protecting against damage. So how do you protect your phone against damage? Well, for one, you want to make sure you protect it against physical damage, and the way you do that is by using a proper case, screen protectors. Most phones are not designed to go underwater, so don't use them underwater. I say most phones because Sarah has a phone that actually is designed to go underwater. Her old Samsung S5, she took underwater video with it because it actually had a waterproof case on it and allows you to do that. Even without a case, apparently. From a electronic standpoint, how do you protect your device? You want to do patches and upgrades. So whenever you see a system update, you want to allow it to download because it's going to give you the latest set of patches. So for instance here, I have a picture of an Android saying, hey, I have a new update. Do you want to upgrade? You go ahead and say OK, and it will download and install that for you. It's like a Windows update. These are things that hackers have found. They found bugs in the system. Android then comes out with a patch to keep the hackers out. If you say no to this, you're leaving yourself vulnerable to a hacker getting into your phone. Same thing with iPhones, right? Down here, we have the awesome 5.1.1, which is, I don't know, 4 or 5 generations old at this point. But again, you would want to download and install once you get back to Wi-Fi, because these updates can be very large. And the iPhone ones, they can be, this one in particular is only 54 megabytes, not a big deal. I've had some that are up to 1 gigabyte in size with updates. And so if you're offered an update to the latest version or the latest update, it's good to do because it's going to end up protecting your device from known attacks. Secondly, you want to know how to use a device locator app, like Find My iPhone or Find My Phone on Android. And you want to know how to back up your data and restore data if you need to, using a hard reset. Again, backing up your data is the most important, because when we look at these devices, they're just devices. How often do you get a new phone? Most people every year or two, right? So you don't really care that much about the phone itself. You care much more about the data on it. Your contacts, your phones, your appointments, your banking information, all of that stuff is really important to you, and that's what we're trying to protect. So these phones are computers, right? Just like everything else. And so you have to worry about malware and antivirus. So there are antivirus for mobile devices. For Android, there's a slew of them out there. This is just a couple of them that I threw up there. For the exam, no one's going to ask you for the company name who makes an antivirus, right? I'm just giving you some examples here. For iOS, there was only one when I wrote this slide. There's a couple more out there now. It's going to be a much bigger business because, again, these are full-fledged computers in your pocket, and you do need to protect yourself. If you're going to be on the internet, you are vulnerable to an attack by hackers and malware. So you got to make sure you're protecting yourself. And remember, we talked about jailbreaking. Jailbreaking on an iPhone is taking away the limitations that Apple imposed on you. So one of those limitations was you can only install software through the Apple Store, right? Through the App Store or iTunes. If you jailbreak it, it opens up a lot of other places that you can get apps from. But no one's checking those. And so you may go over to this other store and download Jason's new test engine program, and it's full of viruses, right? If it went through the Apple Store, they would have scanned it and made sure it was looking right and make sure it's a decently well-made program. But if you go through a jailbreak store, that may not be the case. So you are taking a risk when you jailbreak your device, and you are removing those limitations that Apple put on it, and you're breaking their licensing agreement. Mobile device management. From a business perspective, this is really, really important. So I have hundreds of devices at my company that I have to manage. How do I make sure they're all getting their security patches? How do I make sure that they're all being used appropriately with the proper configurations? Well, that's where mobile device management comes in. There's lots of different manufacturers out there. These are just a couple that I listed: McAfee, AirWatch, LANdesk, and Sybase. Basically, it's a piece of software that allows us to manage a large number of users in the organization. I can push updates to them at certain times a day. I can push configurations to them from one central terminal. Instead of having to say, hey, everybody, bring in your iPhones today for patch updates, I can just push it to them over the air. Critical software for our enterprise and companies who don't allow bring your own devices. So if I'm going to provide you the device, I really should have a mobile device management program in place so I can make sure that they're being kept patched, up to date, have proper antivirus, have proper configurations. Now, the other thing that a lot of companies are doing now is what's called bring your own device. And what bring your own device means is simply that. You can bring in your laptop, you can bring in your iPhone, you can bring in your iPad or tablet, and we'll allow you to connect to our network. Now, a lot of companies are doing this because, A, the employees like it. They like having their own devices, right? Sarah really likes her Android phone. I really like my iPhone. So under a bring your own device policy, we both can bring our devices. The bad thing is the company doesn't have real control over Sarah's device or my device, do they? But we're now touching their network. So if I had gotten malware on my phone and I bring it into your network, guess what? Your network now has malware, right? And so this is a big vulnerability that you got to worry about. It's really a risk versus reward that at the security manager level, they're going to have to determine. It's beyond the scope of A+, but when you get into Security Plus and above, these are decisions that you have to start looking at as, operationally, the employees like having their own devices hooked to our network, but security-wise, we don't really like that. And so we have to make those determinations. Companies like it because they don't have to pay for all these devices because you're buying it as the employee. But again, on the other hand, they don't like it because of the security aspect of it. Again, if we as a company are going to provide you all the devices, we want to use mobile device management. How do you turn off applications? So if you're anything like my wife, if you double click on your iPhone button and you see all the open apps, she has 20 or 30 apps open at one time because she never closes out of things. And it drives me insane because it uses up a lot of resources and drains your battery life a lot faster. Because a lot of these apps will still be doing background processes which are draining your battery life. I tend to be a prolific closer. As soon as I'm done with an app, I'm double tapping and getting rid of it, right? If you're on Android, the way you do that is you go through Settings, Application Running Services. You'll show the running processes, which will show you all the running apps, as seen in the picture here. You'll click on them, and then you can turn them off. With iPhones, this is an old picture, again, iOS 5 and 6, which was what's covered on the 802 exam. You would double-click the Home button, and you'd see this app bar at the bottom, and you'd basically end up pressing and holding the app to show the minus sign, and you'd be able to get rid of it. On the newer devices, iOS 7 and above, when you double-click the button, the home button, you'll actually see all the pictures show up of the apps, and you can scroll left or right through them, and if you want to get rid of one, you just swipe it up, and it closes the app for you. Okay? I know most of the guys in here either have Android or iPhone, so you're pretty familiar with how to close your own apps. But just keep in mind that if you don't close the apps in the background, they're still running and still using data, they're still using battery life, and they're still using processors. So if your phone starts becoming laggy, it's because you're running too many things in the background, just like a computer. So how do you troubleshoot your device? How do you do resets? There's two types of resets. There is the hard reset and the soft reset. The hard reset is when things have gone totally wrong. Basically, you have to reset this phone back to factory condition. On an Android device, you can do it straight from the display. You can see a picture here. You click on Factory Data Reset. It will wipe your data, and it comes out just like as if you just bought the device, right? So it's brand new. All your data is gone. With an iPhone, you usually hook it up to iTunes, and you can do a restore, either restore from backup or restore to factory condition from there. A soft reset, on the other hand, is where we're going to reset the drivers in the OS. It's also called a power cycle. We talked about that before. Basically, you're going to press and hold down your power button, and once you do that, you'll get a big bar that goes across the screen that says power off. Slide that. It'll turn it off like shutting down a computer, and then you turn it back on, brings it all back up again. That's a soft reset. So here's an example of a question you may see. I think I talked about this earlier, right? A user realizes they left their mobile phone in a taxi just a few minutes after the taxi leaves. Which should be done to ensure that none of their private data on the phone is accessed? Should they have a passcode lock? Should they do GPS tracking? Should they remotely wipe it or do a remote backup? Remote wipe, right? Passcode lock's not really going to help you, right? Because that's something you have to do preemptively. If you haven't put one on yet, it's too late. The phone's out of your possession, right? GPS tracking, that'll help you know where it is, but it's not going to protect your data, right? You might know where I am, but I'm already reading your data. That's not going to help you much. Remote wipe will erase all the data, which is going to be good. And a remote backup would actually make sure that anything you hadn't already synced will get synced for you. But again, that's not going to protect your private data. You want to do the remote wipe to get rid of all that data off the device. You may have lost your phone, but at least you're not going to have your data out there in the wild.